I just want to invest in people that really want to be the best that they can be. Hello, everyone. This is Todd Scrima and my good friend John King as my guest, and we're doing taking a risk here. This is called Big Technology, A New World of Change. So I wanted to do this because I think it's important. I'm going to tell you a little story and then cover some big topics. I got John on here because he is a very successful businessman, but he really emulates someone who embraces technology in a big way. And I just think it'd be interesting to hear from him and his thoughts on this. So John, thanks for being with us today. So big picture, I have a lot of things that I feel that I did right as a business person. There's a few areas that I would change. And one of them was I got behind in technology, and then I had to play a bunch of catch up the last couple of years, and I'm still playing catch up. And I don't know, part of me was saying, hey, I had some people around me that were naysayers, like, oh, that won't really happen. So I had that influence. I had another influence where I personally didn't know if the technology was ready yet. But I never took the time to really find out either. And so I ended up taking a couple $1 million and saying, hey, we're going to do this, and we're going to do it in a big way. We're going to be very collaborative about it. And that's was a big part that John's helped us with. So I was, I try and pay attention. I don't listen to the daily news, but I do listen to a lot of podcasts that are very smart people. And Tony Robbins was one. There was a few others that I listened to that really got my brain going on this. And this is a business podcast that we're doing. And it's really, my only hope is that we think a little bit differently about technology. Usually I'm on here and I'm like, hey, this is exactly how to do your personal budget. Or this is, it's more tactic based. This is not. I'm taking a little bit of a risk in that it's just idea brainstorming. And some of the research that I did prior to getting on here would even surprise me. Like, I was just telling John, I didn't realize that Facebook just came out in 2004. I'm not personally a big user of Facebook, but it's definitely changed the world in many ways. I didn't realize that texting came out in 1992. Like in my mind, I don't know when it happened, right? Hybrid cars came out in 1997. Bitcoin came out in 2009. Some of these, when I say some of those dates, it's I believe that we're at kind of a tipping point. So it's been the last 30 years this stuff has been being developed. But in my opinion, there's that book, The Tipping Point. What he talks about is there comes a point where the snowball is rolling downhill and getting bigger and bigger all of a sudden. And that's where I think we're at with this. I'm going to go through some big things that kind of blew my mind when I got into researching them. And then I'm going to have John cover, then we're just going to be kind of discussionary on some of this stuff. So this is big topic. So, one of the things people are talking about is self-driving vehicles and drone delivery. For sure, this is going to happen. It's the technology is already there. I think they're perfecting it a bit, but so what happens a lot with this technology, and John brought this up earlier, he's like, well, Todd, people fear this technology instead of embracing it. And I think that's a lot of what happens with this subject is people are like, well, what are the truck drivers going to do if they're not hauling stuff everywhere? And, we go to this fear-based mentality. And I don't think about it that way. And I would encourage you not to take any of us that way. This probably is the most amazing one to me when I think about it. It's called Blackwater Energy Technology, and it's a combination of solar and water. It works. It's the idea, how we have dams and the water flows through and turns the cranks, and we develop this electricity. They figured out how to do this. So I forgot the company that developed it, but it's a 25-story building, literally of blocks. They use a combination of solar and water technology to replicate a dam. A 25-story building generates enough electricity to power a city. So if you think about that just for a second, there's some 25-story building that looks like a bunch of cinder blocks, literally, and it goes up and comes down every day and it generates electricity. 100% green technology, so there's no fossil fuels involved. And the cost for one of these buildings is $8 million. And this is happening right now. So, the SMUD and, all these utility companies, this will replace that. And so the electricity will probably still come through power lines, but your cost will be like $4 a month for, electricity. So that's a big one. I know it's kind of hard to understand. It's hard for me to understand, but this is out of the box thinking where they're creating these things right now. This company right now has $12 billion in orders for this. This is happening right now. Vertical farming, 40% of all food cost is transportation. So it's a minimization of soil usage because they use water and soil. So think of fish, beans, produce that all will be vertically farmed, literally like one big, huge fish tank. So maybe you go to your grocery store and right beside the grocery store is this vertical farming technology where the fish that you're eating that you get from the store literally was just caught that morning and sliced up. The beans that literally just got harvested 2 hours ago that are on the shelf. And there's no transportation costs. So again, kind of a radical idea, a different way of thinking about how we grow food, but you can think of all the ripple effects of all these things. Going back to the Blackwater energy technology, I grew up in Redding, California. We have Shasta Dam there. And the big fight is always, hey, we got to send all the water from the dam down to Southern California in order for their water supply. What if that just goes away, right? When we don't have that need anymore, that's kind of really the ripple effects of all this gets a little overwhelming. Next one's interesting about mirror technology. 100% solar. They basically set up a bunch of mirrors. It all points towards one target. That target gets so hot, it's literally 30% the temperature of the sun's surface. I don't know how hot that is, but it's really hot. Okay.
Really hot.
And then they take that and they harness it and they use that for electricity. And so no coal, no gas, no fossil fuels, no burning old tires, all that becomes obsolete. This technology is in play right now. Okay. Blockchain technology is the whole idea that fuels Bitcoin, but it diminishes bureaucracy. In a currency standpoint, like Bitcoin, it could become a worldwide currency. Obviously, very easy to use. But think about that. I mean, things like what the yen is trading for versus the US dollar, that goes away. This is a real possibility. By the way, when I say all this, I want you to hear me loud and clear. I am not suggesting that you go invest money in these things. Don't go out and buy a bunch of Bitcoin because you heard Todd said it was going to be I don't know if it's going to be the next thing. These are just ideas. I don't know if the mirror technology will actually work and be done in a mass way. I don't know these things. These are just ideas that are happening as we speak. And I believe we're at a tipping point. Think of it like this. Think of the Industrial Revolution. And that really helped shape America because we were the first ones to figure out, the famous, one of my reference points to that era was The Wealth of Nations was a book written. And part of the book was talking about, this book was written like in 1920, 1930. And it was about, there's a story in there about, the muskets they used to manufacture, and they would hire one guy and he could do one musket a day. And then the story goes in the book that they got 5 guys, and one guy just did the triggers, and one guy just did the barrel, and they could produce 15 guns a day with 5 guys instead of 5 guns with 5 guys. And that story kind of emulates the factory system and the Industrial Revolution. And so that's kind of, in our era, this is kind of what's happening today, and it's it kind of blows your head a little bit. So, John, I'd love some opening comments from you, because I think this is one of those. It's like a hobby for you, right? You're kind of like really into this.
Yeah, thanks, Todd. Appreciate you bringing me on here. It's funny, you talk about the fact that we're at a tipping point, and I love where you kind of referred back to the Industrial Revolution, because to me, I don't think we're at a tipping point at all. I think we're at the same tipping point that we were back in 1994. I remember at 1994, I'm working for Radio Shack. Yes, Radio Shack. And I was at a national convention, and they were talking about the big pipe. And nobody knew what the big pipe was. And they said, you have no idea what's coming, but we are working on the infrastructure to deliver something called high speed internet. And our eyes were wide open, and we had no idea what they were talking about. And they said, imagine downloading an entire movie in 2 minutes. And we were astounded. Imagine loading a web page in a matter of seconds instead of a matter of minutes. Remember, this is 1993, 1994. Like, these things were beyond our scope of thinking. And today it's just normal. And, high-speed rail, and yeah, we can get political on the whole California thing. I'm not going there. But high-speed rail, if you think about it, if somebody said, hey, we're gonna have you float on magnets, and we're gonna have you in a train that's never actually going to touch the ground. It's not going to touch anything. It's just going to be floating magnetically, but it'll move super fast because there's no friction. This is science fiction. This is way beyond anything but it's real. Like, that's happening today. And I think that the key thing you pointed out when you started out, Todd, is fear. I think that every moment, the guy that was building the musket was afraid of, well, what happens if there's a problem with the manufacturing? And how can, if I'm only working on the trigger, what about the guy who created the barrel? And what if he has a defect in what he did? And how's that going to impact me or the quality, or all these different excuses that we put in our head? And I think that, to me, is the crux of what I think about technology and tipping points. It's all perspective. And there's so many reasons why we should embrace technology. There's also so many reasons why we need to make sure that we're taking a measured pace, that we're doing it in the right way, that we're not jumping onto every early adoption, hey, this is going to be the next thing. So when it comes to opening comments, that's kind of my take, is I think it's really about framing where we're at today and looking at all the advances we've had over the years and saying, everybody felt that way 10 years ago, and today it's just normal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Some other, again, brain thought is, when you think about this, well, I think of a few things. First of all, I think of the famous Netflix versus Blockbuster thing. And, you basically had Blockbuster, and you could go pick up your stuff, and then they kind of copied Netflix for a while, where they mail them to your home. And then Netflix was just like, we'll stream it. And it was so, to this day, it's interesting to me, because my kids will watch Netflix, and I hardly ever will, but it's like, I don't know, $15 a month or whatever it is. And then you can have several accounts, and they just made it super easy. They engineered it correctly. It seems like over the last 10 years, their content got a lot more updated. They started making their own, mini series and TV shows. They're just, but it's at your fingertips. And of course, now you have Apple TV. And I saw that Black Widow, the actress Scarlett Johansson, was suing Disney because her contract had to do with movie sales, and they released it online the same day. When is the time that you thought, gosh, I personally like going to the movies when I get a chance, because it's an event and you get out of the house. But there are times you're like, I really want to see that opening, and I'm willing to pay $30 for it, and yes, they make it available.
Yeah, I think that you bring up Netflix. Netflix today is totally different than what Netflix was when it started, because its goal was to compete with Blockbuster and do something a little different. And there is nothing about Netflix that resembles how it started. And I think that's how I think people should view technology. It isn't static. It isn't, this is what it is, and that's how it's going to be forever. But that pushes a major emotional button. And that's the fear of change. It's, the typical human likes consistency. We like to know what's going to happen and be a predictable outcome. Tomorrow is going to repeat today. And I know that's what's going to happen. And I have comfort in that. I have security in that. And I think as business owners, we have to recognize that in our people, whether that be our clients that we're asking to change and adopt new technology, whether that be our team members, we're asking them to step outside of their comfort zone. And for you, for me, Todd, that's normal. That's what we do. I mean, being an entrepreneur, we don't have a comfort zone, right? But the key is that's not how everybody thinks. And if you're going to have any opportunity, Todd, we're in the middle of rolling out a lot of new technology within Summit Funding. And it's about helping people be comfortable with change and comfortable that even what we're creating and giving you today, it'll be different next month. And that's unnerving. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you help people get comfortable with being uncomfortable, with being outside of their normal routine, and then having that routine change again and again.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if I know the answer, but I have some thoughts on it. And you hit on the old 6 human needs. So one of those needs is certainty, right? So when things are changing, we don't feel certain. We certainly felt that going through a huge pandemic where there was massive fear. But yet we also have these other needs, which is growth and variety. And technology does fit those things. And so they're almost at extreme opposites of each other. And so I think that is an inner fight that we have emotionally. You think about it. I had a gentleman that John and I work with, and he's in our Chicago branch. And this is maybe last June. Wait, what month are we in? Yeah, it's about a year ago. And he calls me and says, Todd, I got a question for you. I said, yeah, how can I help? And he says, I want to move to Tennessee, Nashville. And I said, from Chicago? He said, oh, yeah. I said, well, you lived there your whole life. He says, yeah, I just, I want to leave. There's more crime. And he went on to say some things. And it was a lifestyle decision. And I said, hey, I'll talk to your branch manager. I'm sure we can work it out. And he says, oh, thank God. I said, well, why'd you say that? He says, because I already bought a house. He says, I just got into contract this morning and I was waiting to call you. And, I just did a podcast that I'm just brainstorming. I just did a podcast with Vasily, who speaks Ukraine, and he just got back from a business trip from South Carolina, and he was out there for a week. And I said, what are you doing out in South Carolina? Was it a family trip? He says, no, business. I said, well, you live in California. He says, 50% of my loans are coming from South Carolina. I said, 50%? He does a lot of loans. I said, good. How did that happen? And then he just told me, he says, Todd, COVID started. I just started marketing in different areas. I said, well, did you have to market 3,000 miles away? He says, it just happened. And now he says, now I'm opening Florida. And that's different. Like, that's different to think that way, where you're like, here you have, classically, our business has been very regionally based, but now you have this gentleman, for example, doing business in a whole nother state. And then I have another employee that moved states and kept his business and is developing new business where he's at. These are all changes. And a lot of it is because technology and the acceptance of technology.
It's funny. I have a story, not my story. I'll give credit to the author. So Danny Mayer, who is the founder of Shake Shack, and he wrote a book called Setting the Table. And in that book, it's a business book talking about hospitality and how to deliver customer service at a significantly higher level. But one of the things you said was, we put constraints around ourselves. We say, hey, I can only do business in this way because that's how it's always been done. And one of the things Danny talks about in that book is he has a saying within his organization: whoever wrote the rule that blank must be true. Whoever wrote the rule that I can't do a mortgage more than driving distance from my office? Whoever wrote the rule that says I can't market myself 3,000 miles away and only visit there once a year? I think that statement can be a profound way to start opening up ways to embrace technology, to embrace just general change. We all have these rules. We have no idea where they came from, but we have them ingrained in us. And we don't ever ask ourselves, who really wrote that rule? Why do I do that other than because it's always been done that way?
Mhm. You know, this is, we have a process in our company where we basically combine two positions. And this has been happening over the last 2, 3 years. And I had so many employees tell me in the last few years, Todd, I don't want to do that. I can't do that. I won't do that. I will quit if you make me do that. And what's funny is none of that happened.
No.
I heard all this rhetoric, and then we had a few people have some real success with it, and it did decrease cost and increased accountability and decreased stress for everybody. And then we kind of poster boyed them and said, no, call this person that they've been through this. And so a lot of people do have that strong reaction that says, I'm not doing this. You also made me think, when you think about, this is where it gets a little overwhelming, as you think about you think about the ripple effects of all this stuff, like the dam idea. So I've got a sushi restaurant. That's my favorite food. And I only go to it about 4 times a year because it's 30 minutes from me. And I'm thinking about this drone technology, and I'm like, I could literally get on Uber Eats or whatever, order it, and a drone delivers it, 30 minutes away, because the drone only costs the restaurant, 30 cents or something. So, I mean, when you're talking about doing business in other areas, that's one example where now maybe that sushi restaurant does a lot more business because people don't have to drive there anymore.
Yes.
Right? It's an
Yes.
obscure area, but it doesn't matter to their business plan anymore.
But
That's
here's
crazy.
the challenge. The challenge is you've got to be careful if you want to be the pioneer. You've got to be careful. I read the Elon Musk autobiography, I don't know, but his book. And it was written about him, not by him. So which one is that? Anyway, and he said in the book, he talked about the fact that the technology already existed. He just harnessed it. He wasn't the first one. Like, we don't know, I don't even know who the company was that first started with the self-driving technology. It wasn't his brainchild. He had the means to put it all together. And so you've got to be careful on what wagon you hitch yourself to, right? It is a lot of that sushi restaurant being the first one that develops the drone technology. I don't know if they're going to succeed or not, but if that one restaurant didn't succeed, it's on the back of their failure that the next one will succeed. Mm-hmm. And that's where, as an individual, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, you have to expect to fail a little bit in technology. You have to, that has to be part of the plan. Because if you think it's going to work and then it doesn't, forget it. This is, I knew we never should have tried that. Well, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Mm-hmm. And so you have to make sure you didn't invest too much in that early technology. If you want to be the pioneer, that's great. But I was on a call an hour ago talking about the technology that we're building within Summit Funding. And we have one of our users that is really looking for a lot more development. He wants it to be just so much further. And he brought up somebody else who's built a similar product. And he goes, man, in the last 8 months, this other guy, just in 8 months worth of work, this other guy has gotten so far. And in the last year, we haven't made as much growth as they have. And what he failed to recognize is how much time that person spent in the 5 years leading up to it. It just happened to be the culmination of that 5 years, the overnight success, 5 years in the making. Yeah. Technology is the same thing. You have to recognize if you're adopting somebody else's technology, that's a lot easier because they've already gone through the pain. But now you're limited to what they wanted and how they wanted it built. Mm-hmm. If you're trying to create your own technology, it's going to take time. It's I think I have the right analogy, Todd. The bamboo tree, when you plant a bamboo seed, and what does it take? It takes you plant the bamboo seed and you water it for 5 years, and nothing happens. You know, day after day, year after year, nothing happens for 5 years, and all of its growth happens in the 6th year. But
Yeah.
if you would have dug it up and oh my gosh, what's happening? Why isn't this working? You just destroyed the process,
Right.
because all the work you did for the first 4 years of that bamboo seed, doing all the work underground, you didn't see any of the growth until that 6th year. And I think that's really a big part of embracing technology, is understanding that that theory applies very, very directly to adding and embracing technology into your business.
Yeah, and I would also dovetail with that when you look at all this strategy, you got to make sure that whatever you're doing fits your business and your business strategy. And I think that plays into all this. I always tell people there's always businesses and money to be made in any market, good or bad. You just got to understand the strategy and execute. And that's kind of what you're saying around technology. It's like, let's not play with something if the ROI on it or the potential ROI is not great. Why would we do it? But if it is great, then let's tackle it and just go for it and realize it's gonna be a lot of work.
Yes.
And it's gonna take a lot of time. I have a curiosity question. How much do you think the pandemic sped up the adoption rate of overall technology? Because we talk about Zoom and stuff, that's pretty obvious. But do you think it had a significant change in how people are willing to tackle some of these things and use them?
I do. I 100%. I think that the pandemic itself created out of necessity. I've got to lean on more technological tools. What I don't know is, are we going to revert back to the mean as things get back to typical? First of all, what's typical? What's normal? I don't know. Okay. But from a technological adoption, that was, Zoom meetings. This is fantastic. But part of my business has to be getting out and meeting with my clients and with my team face to face. So do I stop using Zoom altogether? No. Do I need to use it as much as I used it before? No. So it's a delicate balance. And I think that it increased adoption significantly. And I think the key is figuring out which pieces you are going to help you be more efficient without losing your effectiveness. Because we can be super, super efficient and lose a lot of effectiveness. We aren't productive, or we aren't growing like we need to grow, because all we've been focused on is how efficient we can be. So to answer your question directly, Todd, I think that it was a huge catalyst, and it forced people to make change. Working from home and all the technological pieces that come from it, we would never have made the advances we have in the last 18 months if we weren't forced to. But I was as part of Summit Funding, we have a coaching organization. We coach our internal loan officers, and I'm a coach. So I was coaching one of my students yesterday, and we were talking about remote training. And she said, I've got a problem. I've hired somebody, and I have 2 offices now. I'm moving to a different geographic location, an hour and a half away. I can't train her because I'm not there. And I had a playbook for her, because I had to figure it out by the seat of my pants, because I hired 2 brand new people July of last year that I had never met. To this day, I haven't met them. But I have a great relationship with them because we figured out how to do it virtually. Would I choose virtual training over in person? No. But can we make it work? Absolutely. It's the thought process behind how do we adopt the things that worked in a physical world, in a face-to-face world, and translate that into the virtual world. And there's some components of that I think are here to stay.
Yeah. Yeah, I got 2 stories that I was smiling when you said those stories. So one's a quick one. Our CEO called me. It was 2nd or 3rd week of March of 2020. Pandemic was just getting rolling, and the government directives were out. Hey, you got to work off site. So CIO calls me. We're all working crazy hours. It's about 8 o'clock at night on a Thursday. Just one of those calls. You're like, I remember where I was. I was in my kitchen, and he says, "Hey Todd, I got some news for you, and I don't want you to freak out." I said, "Okay." He says, we have to offsite every single employee over the next 2 weeks. And I won't say what I said. I used an expletive and I said, no way. And it just came out. And I loved his leadership in the moment. He says, Todd, it's part of our disaster plan. It works and it will work and it will be fine. And I was like, no way. And I started arguing with him and he just shut me down. He's all, listen, I got it. I'm just letting you know what's happening. Right. So that's because the reason I say that story is because it's like a before and after moment. Like how could you take thousands of people and just offsite them? Like, how does that work? Right. That's the overwhelm part. And then the second piece is, again, this is more like April and, interest rates drop and everyone's buying a home and everyone's refinancing. I'm in a war room with a group of my leaders and we come up with a number, and the number at the time was we had to hire 400 employees in roughly 5 months, sooner if possible. And our corporate office, our main corporate office is in Sacramento, California. Well, there's not 400, experienced people, underwriters and funders and stuff in our industry that are available. And I made a statement and I said, we're going to have to hire people all over the United States and they're going to have to work from home. And a few of my people were processing, and a few of them started to say, no, that'll never work. And I was just like, it's got to work. We literally don't have a choice. There's no there's no other solution. And we talked through it another 20 minutes and we walked out of there and we're like, okay, yeah, we're going to hire 300 or 400 people to work from home and we're going to train them virtually. And that's how it's going to be because we don't have a choice. And that was a big before and after moment. I get this employee report once a week. And at the time before the pandemic, we had, I think it was 40 offsite people that worked offsite. And I remember I would kind of ask people about every once in a while, hey, how's that person doing out in Kansas? Oh, good. They're great. And I'm like, they do the same amount of work as everyone. Yeah. That matter of fact, they're top 10%. Like, okay. just little things like that. So I think to your point, the Shake Shack guy and who made that rule, who made the rule we can't, operate all over. And also speaks to the overwhelm piece of, what do you mean you're going to offsite every single employee? I mean, I still showed up at the office because I like working from the office. There was nobody here. There were the first few months, when I say no, there was 20 people in a building that literally a few weeks ago had 400 people in it. I was like, wow, this is weird.
Your coveted parking spot didn't mean so much anymore, did it, Todd?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you talk about all this stuff and what comes from that. So John, let me paraphrase what I heard you say so far. You're saying, hey, don't freak out. Don't let it overwhelm you. Change will happen no matter what. And then I'm kind of saying, and you said this too, be careful on what you decide to tackle in your business, if that's a strategy that's going to fit your long-term plan, and be okay. One of the things we've learned to do, and this is a process, is we experiment a lot. And so maybe one of the strategies that business people can take is, hey, we're going to start this project. We're going to, when we get it done, we'll test it and see if we have any kind of success and see if we can prove what we think it's going to do.
I couldn't agree with you more. I remember, oh gosh, this was 2004. Went to Europe, went to Spain with my wife and my sister-in-law, and we visited La Sagrada Familia. It is in Barcelona, and huge cathedral that was built. And I don't know where it is, but I had a little crystal rendering of it sitting on my desk for years because of the story I learned when I went there. And I think it was Gaudi who had designed it originally. And he designed this cathedral, and he had a vision of what it was going to look like. But when they started building it, the technology did not exist to complete it per his designs. They had no idea how they were going to make it as tall. They've never built a building that tall. They've never built a building that had that architecture in it. And they had no clue how they were going to get it done. But he had faith that if I just painted the picture, if I just created the vision of what I wanted, I have no clue how we're going to get there, but we're going to figure it out. And it was that vision, it was that symbol for me that I had on my desk for years and years and years that just reminded me, I don't know how I'm going to get there, but if I can paint the picture of what it's going to look like, the energy of the world will come together, and it might take the technology might not exist for a couple of years. But if I'm in the right mindset, if I have the right steps taken to get there and I'm stuck now. All right, I'm going to keep looking subconsciously for how do I get to that next level? And it's going to appear because there's so many things that we see that come across our field of vision every single day that we ignore because we're not focused on it. And if you have that vision like Gaudi had of building that cathedral, the implementation of it will come over time. And I think that's a really, really big piece when you think about technology. And I think the second piece is to know that with technology comes the need to have process and organizational enhancements as well. And I was reading an article recently, and they were talking about Moore's law. So I won't get into the technical Moore's law, but Moore's law essentially says the technology, the speed of technology, the speed of circuit boards will double in every 18 months. Okay, so it's a law that has worked over time. And what this article talked about is it talked about the fact that Moore's law is the physical computing piece of it that is going to speed up significantly. The future adaptation of that is AI. Like AI is going to take over. It's there, but we're going to see it twice as powerful in a year to 18 months as we see it today. A year after that, it's going to be exponentially greater. But this article talked about to harness the technology comes the need for organizational innovation and process improvements. And they are not increasing anywhere near as fast as technology is. And that's something that I'm going to tell a quick story, Todd, about when we rolled out paperless at our company. Remember when we rolled out paperless? I think Todd knows where I'm going with this. So we had, I mean, that was the way to go. We were going to stop using paper files. And so we went fully digital. The problem is we went fully digital with a paper mindset. So we scanned everything into the computer. It was all digital and we filed it. Now picture this, in our industry for years and years and years, you had just a manila folder with the two clips on the top and you had a left side and a right side. You'd open the folder and there'd be things that go on the left and they go in a certain order. And there's things that go on the right and they go in a certain order. And our first adaptation of technology going paperless was literally recreating that folder in a digital environment. And totally the wrong approach, totally the wrong implementation of technology, but we took what we knew, we took our process and applied the new technology to our old process. And it's a really vivid illustration of the challenges with embracing technology is you've also got to think about what is my organizational structure, what is my process, and what steps should I consider changing? What improvements do I need to take? Because the human element is going to be your biggest challenge when you're thinking about technology and how people implement that and what steps they take. They're never going to get enough value from technology if they don't start rethinking what they do in a whole different way. You can't replicate the old process in a new medium and get any real traction out of it.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. Hopefully, guys, that sinks in a little bit because what John's talking about is exactly right. I have a saying that process trumps personality, and sometimes I say that. What I mean by that is I've seen so many people like sales. Let me use salespeople just because a lot of people can relate to that. I can take a really good salesperson that's process driven, but maybe they're not. Their actual people skills and rapport building skills and stuff aren't as great as someone else's. But because they're very process driven, they will outsell the gregarious salesperson by 2, 3, 4 times. And I've seen that in coaching. I've seen it with salespeople, and that's part of what John is saying. I think the other part is that whole idea of, I got into this several years ago where Six Sigma and Black Belt, all these schools of thought about how to properly think about and re-engineer process, and also how to keep it updated on a regular basis. And it's a significant weakness for almost any business that I have seen, including my own. So, we're trying to make up ground on all that stuff. Part of it is technology, but a big part of it, just a bigger part of that is process. And I think that's your point, is like, you can do a lot of stuff with technology, but if it's still hard to do, or it still is not intuitive, I'll give an example. I got to get a new nanny. My current nanny school schedule doesn't match up with my kid's schedule. And so I got her working in one of my companies, and just segue her, but I'm looking for a new one. So night before last, I jump on care.com. I hadn't been on it in a long time. And I thought, okay, well, let me just see. Well, care.com, of course, is a website that helps you find nannies and other people, handyman, stuff like that. So I go on care.com, and they lead me through this kind of super easy, intuitive ad making process. I mean, it literally took me maybe 60 seconds to form an ad for a nanny, how many hours I needed, how much I was willing to pay, my location, all that stuff. And then it posted the ad, and then brought me to the search place where it matched me with people that met that. So consequently, it was probably about 10 minutes total of work, including reaching out and messaging to a few people. And I've got 2, I think, highly qualified interviews this weekend. And that whole, their technology and how intuitive it was, I think I may have 15 minutes into the whole project. Now, if you go back 20 years ago, place an ad in a newspaper, go through 100 resumes, they can't work the hours you need, on and on and on. That may have been what for me may be a 2 or 3 hour process today may have been a 15-hour process 20 years ago. And that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we're talking about. I was just so impressed with how, and what occurred to me, I'm like, hey, if a nanny finding place can figure this out, then a lot of businesses can, because those things, they exist out there, and it's not, that technology's there, and it's got to be well thought out.
So here's the danger of what I heard you say, because I heard you talk about how simple the process is, and how well nanny.com has built out this process. But that's been through so many iterations over so much time that they've gotten to that place. And as entrepreneurs, as business owners, we have to recognize we're not the end user that's going to get that polished product handed to us. Or if we do, our competition is light years ahead of us. If you're at the point where you're shopping for a product that delivers the nanny.com experience for you and your clients, your competition already has it, they've mastered it, they've marketed it, and you're behind the curve. So you've got to figure out how to accept messiness. It's progress, not perfection. You have to embrace technology that is broken, that won't do exactly what you want it to do, or choose, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this choice, but I think it has a cost. Choose that I'm going to wait until the technology has been perfected. But I mentioned a moment ago, the cost of that is your competition is now already using that technology. Your clients, the biggest competition, can I talk about our competition, Todd? Mm-hmm. The biggest competition in the mortgage industry, the number 1 lender is Quicken or Rocket Mortgage, and they're saying push button, get mortgage. Doesn't exist. But it does for 0.1% of buyers that meet all of these little criteria, but they've built the technology, and they invested a lot of money, they took a lot of time to build it, and now the rest of us are playing catch up. And it's because from a marketing perspective, they now own that thought process in the client's mind, that it is super simple, and it can be. Majority of people, it's not. For a majority of buyers, it's not. But because they figured out how to build it and they invested in it early enough, now the rest of us, it's not just our company, it's every company other than Rocket, literally is trying to play catch up. How do we replicate that? Because they now own in the mind of the consumer the ability to make it super easy to push a button and get a mortgage. And if you wait for it to be that easy, your competition now has that mindset, that thought process living in the eyes of your clients, and now you're playing catch up.
Yeah, yeah. I think you got, John, as we start to wrap this up, I've never done a podcast where it's like, hey, we're just sharing ideas, we're talking about big thought, but I think just to review some things. Well, let me say one other thing before we do some things that I heard you say mainly. One is, don't fear this stuff. Like, it shouldn't be a fearful thing. It should be a fun thing. I don't think anything to do with that fear idea is a good idea. So we talked about some kind of big things and some little things and some examples of that. I think some insightful things that came out of this is it is a lot about process, not just technology. That's one thing. Companies that have a recognition that process and looking at it from the customer's point of view and all that and testing it, those are all big ideas. Once you get whatever it is in place, it's constant, attention, like a regular process for reevaluating and fixing the bugs and all those things. I think it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I think when I was younger, I used to have a harder time kind of embracing technology. And now I just look at it as kind of fun. Like, it's cute when you're at home and your kids are like, how many people live in the United States? And we're like, I don't know, Alexa, it's kind of, there is a certain amount of fun when you're exhausted on a Friday night, but you and the kids really want to see that new movie. It is kind of cool to not leave your house, and do it. And sometimes it is cool to leave your house, and having those choices. I think it's a beautiful thing. I really do. I think it's so exciting. I also think that I want to be careful with this comment because it may sound counterintuitive, but there are time periods where I'm sure back in Europe when the big ships were built and all of a sudden you could go to Spain, and then quickly they found America, and I'm sure that was a thing. Like, I'm sure that was the buzz for 100 years, talking about, hey, we're going to take a ship next month and we're going to go down to Spain from England or whatever. Then the Industrial Revolution and how gargantuan that was. And now it's the technology. And after this, there'll be some other big, huge focus for 100 years. So I just wanted to frame that up because I think it's not, I don't want to make it sound like technology is everything. I know as COVID's lightened up a little bit, I've been on planes a lot because I just miss the people, and sometimes you just got to see the people. Just like we missed our parents, you missed. So there's some things that are kind of timeless and some of it is human relationship. I think that's important to mention when you're talking about technology. It's not meant to take the place of some things, but if it saves you time, makes you more efficient, makes it easier for the client, those are all good reasons to use it. So those are some high points for me. John, give me some closing comments.
So I think when you think about technology, I think technology for the sake of technology is not a valuable investment of your time as a business owner. I think you need to think about who is your client that you are trying to serve through your technological improvements. Maybe it's your internal team, maybe it's your external clients. You also have to recognize the cost, and I'm not talking fiscal. Sometimes, and we're dealing with this right now, some technological advancements that help this client hurt this client. It takes us a step backwards over here. And that's a risk you're going to take. You have to recognize that A, you got to break some eggs, right? But also B, you have to recognize that who's the most important client that you need to serve and what do you need to do to take care of them. But don't ignore the rest of your clients, like your team, your internal clients. If you don't take care of them, if everything is externally focused, let's improve technology to take care of our end consumer, your team's gonna mutiny because they're not going to want to work for somebody that makes their life more difficult every single day for minor enhancements or improvements to the end user experience. I think that's a big overriding theme. But I also think that sometimes you have to think like Steve Jobs. The iPhone, when everybody talked about the iPhone or the iPad, and why do you need that? Even the iPod, like Steve Jobs had conviction. He knew they don't understand why they need it because they don't have it in their hands. But once I put it in their hands, they're going to wonder what they did without it. And every once in a while, you got to take that moonshot. You've got to say, you know what, this is the thing that I feel strongly that my client doesn't understand that they really need it. But once they have it in their hand, they're going to wonder what they did without it. And you got to know that sometimes you're going to be wrong. They really didn't need it. So that's a big piece of embracing technology and not fearing it, is just understanding a few of those fundamentals. Be willing to take the moonshot on something that nobody says they need, but they don't know because they've never experienced it. And if you're willing to take that chance, you can make significant improvements in your business, improve your own life, improve your team's life and your clients' lives, and really have fun with embracing technology.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. But you made 2 or 3 really good points there. So guys, this came out better than I thought. I think John has a unique way of thinking about this, and including the clients and the internal clients and the company. And I just think about these things almost like I think on down the road. I look at what like VRBO did for people who wanted to do vacation rentals for homes. And shoot, I have a couple friends, they do that for a living, right? They bought a bunch of rentals and they use VRBO, and I'm sure VRBO loves them. VRBO as a company is making 2-3 grand for doing almost nothing a month from one client. It's just, there's some ingenious things that people can do. And sometimes they're not so ingenious. They're just little tweaks. And I just think it's, I know it sounds weird to order sushi and have it delivered by a drone, but those are just tweaks. They're still making sushi, right? They're still got to develop a great product. So this stuff can get a little overwhelming. My closing advice is have fun with it, and don't overthink it. Just touch it a little bit. Maybe it's 15 minutes a day or 30 minutes a week or something. Just touch it and let it digest in your brain. It's no different than any other idea. You're thinking about something, or you're really bothered by something, and then you wake up the next day and you're like, oh, that's what I should do. Or that doesn't really bother me anymore. It's kind of, understanding that we're not computers and we have feelings, and those feelings sometimes do weird things to us. So John, you did an excellent job. I really appreciate you. I really appreciate the insight that you had into the technology. And I think some people will get some real benefit on how this applies to their business. Okay. Thanks for listening, guys. Remember, you can always get these visuals on beyourbestseries.com. Also, remember, we do mortgage loans. So if you find someone if someone sent you this and they're like, hey, I got a friend who needs to refinance, or I need a friend who needs to buy a house. That's what we do for a living. We do home loans. So feel free to refer us. This is fun to do, but it's also a way for you to get to know different people in the company, and we can get referrals because that's mostly how we get our business. So guys, thank you for listening. Text it out to one friend. John, thank you again. I appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, Todd.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
I just want to invest in people that really want to be the best that they can be.